Alright guys, welcome back to Valorant News. Major drama continues in the Valorant world. Only a few weeks ago, a major match-fixing scandal was unveiled, it seems, by Jinggg, and after massive controversy and discussion over the last few days, that has now been put to bed, it seems, to some degree for the time being. Rumour has it, though, Riot is still conducting investigations behind the scenes. We may have further implications in due course, but it coincides at a rather interesting time, with Riot Games officially confirming that betting sponsorships and partnerships will be unveiled and allowed in the League of Legends side, and of course also in the VCT. This could potentially be a massive positive for the tier 2 and other ecosystems in due course. The teams have been asking for this for some time, but it definitely raises questions given the current state of this scenario in Valorant esports. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, just to mention here on Jinggg, I think this was actually from his mother, and she confirmed that his wrist injury is, well, it's not like it's nothing to worry about, but it wasn't what we maybe thought it was, because when he talked about wrist injury as an esports player, you're starting to think, oh no, you know, maybe it's some sort of carpal tunnel syndrome, or he's got some sort of issue in his wrist that's affecting him. And he said that, you know, he still won somehow Masters Toronto with it. But she says, guys, many of you asking me what happened to Jinggg. Wrist, he sprained it while picking up the luggage. That was pretty funny. So yeah, it's maybe not so much of an issue to worry about, really. The only time I'm not around to take my luggage, and, you know, unfortunately, he had a bit of an issue. So anyway, he went on to win the championship, and it seems that hopefully that'll heal up and it'll all be okay. So probably not too much to worry about on that front. Gen.G Fishy and Heretics, they made a big confirmation yesterday that Gen.G is going to stay around with Heretics, at least for the time being. As he says, I get to play against NRG, I've been waiting for this for 3 years, and Heretics, NRG, TEC, RRQ in the same group at the World Cup in a couple of weeks' time, as we know. But we'll get to the Gen.G Fishy stuff. Actually, we'll do it now, and I'll do the other topic in a second. Heretics confirm it, that he renews at least until the end of 2026. So, yeah, I think it's been an interesting development with Heretics. Of course, they did not have the tournament back in Toronto they'd have looked for. But, of course, at the end of the tournament, they'll look back at it, and they'll look at the Heretics curse, and they'll say, damn, we lost to Wolves, we lost to Paper X. Those teams came top 3, so maybe Heretics are the 4th best team or whatever. You never really know. But they've not been quite as strong so far this season. They've had their moments, but yeah, they've not been able to replicate some of their success from previously. And there was lots of talk after they bombed out of Toronto that, yeah, serious changes are necessary. Maybe the Boo brothers, it's time to go or whatever. But Gen.G Fishy ain't going anywhere. He's been a great player, I think, really, since joining these guys. The success that they've had together. I think initially there was a bit of a question mark, obviously coming over from the Fortnite side, whether he would really be able to hack it. But also he is the face of the team in many respects, right? Like, he is the biggest personality, so that does not look especially set to change. So they've confirmed this deal is going to run at least through the end of next season, so Heretics are sticking by their man for the time being. Now, we did talk yesterday about where potential additional events may arrive from. So we know that this year Champions is in Paris. Next year Champions is reported to be in, I don't know if they've confirmed it yet, but it's going to be a Chinese event. I'm pretty sure that's the general theory of where they're going to host Champions next year. So if there are presumably 2 other Masters events happening next season, where are they going to be? Now, there was a report from Human yesterday that one of those reports was in Latin America. You guys are pointing out to me because I think I kind of read this as just we're going back to South America in general, in the same way that, you know, the lock-in event a couple of years ago that we had in Brazil. But, you know, when he said LATAM, obviously he's also talking about potentially anyway those other countries in the Latin, like the north side of South America, talking potentially countries like Chile, which does make some sense when you consider, let's say, Crew Esports, and from that region, of course, you know, big audience over there. So yeah, the latest rumor is that potentially they're looking at Santiago, capital of Chile. That could be an option too. So it makes a lot of sense to go back to South America, Latin America, whether they could go to Brazil or to Argentina, or potentially to somewhere like Chile and Santiago. That could be very interesting, I think, as a development here for the Valorant scene. We'll see if that happens. But yeah, a few months ago, that was the rumor, apparently, according to Tanmay, that Santiago and then London, potentially the other tournament. So I guess it makes sense, right? If they're going to run 3 Masters events around the world, like this year, they did one in Bangkok, right, over in the Pacific, let's say. They've done one in Toronto in the Americas, and then Champions is in Europe, it's in Paris. So presumably if they're going to run the Masters events, they will think, okay, if we do one in Santiago, that's the Americas covered. If the World Championship is out in China, then that's kind of that region generally covered, right? Obviously, the Chinese region and the Pacific are 2 separate regions, but in terms of parts of the world, relatively similar, and that would imply that they would need, to make it fair, I suppose, an event in Europe, somewhere in EMEA. That could be anywhere, but we've had plenty of events around Europe over the last couple of years. And I mean, in Manchester, there was one up here, the Red Bull home grounds they did a couple of years ago. But apart from that, we've not really had all that much. So the idea of a London Masters in 2026, could be pretty interesting to me. So tweet your thoughts on that in the comment section below, especially if you guys are also from the UK. This was an interesting article here from Sheep Esports talking about Sentinels and where they go from here. We know that these esports teams, they do burn a lot of money, right? And over the last couple of years, Sentinel's key indicators have looked like this. Their turnover is the green number, their cost to the white number, and therefore their operational result is the red number. And it's not looked great, but this year they made a hell of a lot more money. They didn't spend any more money, so their deficit, as it were, has become far stronger. And they've got a vision in terms of what they're going to do next, and the strategic catalyst for the team and all this stuff, the economic asset of the team, and less fundraising, more income, whatever, maybe going into new games and stuff like this. I thought it was always pretty interesting to keep an eye on how things are going in these esports organization business models, let's say, because it is a challenge to make money, but one thing that Sentinels are potentially moving towards over the coming years. But speaking of making more money for these organizations, this is when the betting discussion starts to come into play. Now, this has been a major talking point at Valorant for some time. I think especially around actually the Tier 2 scene. Now, of course, it's maybe even more controversial in the Tier 2 scene, but I think the point is that many of these organizations in Tier 2 simply have no way to make money by supporting their players. The only way to do so potentially is to at some point sell those players on to a team in the Pro League, which is often quite challenging to make happen, or to win Ascension and get the other benefits associated with that. But it's not cheap to fund a team that's potentially going to be good enough to win Ascension. And a lot of the sponsors that they would like to sign to support their team are blocked by Riot's rules on sponsorships. And if you look at the sponsored organizations that will pay money to sponsor teams, especially in Tier 2, there's going to be a lot of betting companies. And until now, Riot has blocked anything of that ilk. It was not long ago that Gen.G Fishy got a fine or whatever, he got a warning for betting on the League of Legends Championship Grand Final. And he was told he wasn't allowed to do that. Now, I'm not sure that rule is necessarily going to change, but it's all in the kind of same concept of this. So Riot do a big article yesterday, why we are opening betting sponsorships in esports and how we are doing it responsibly. I've always believed that building the future of esports means investing in a sustainable ecosystem, not just today, but for the long run. And they've talked about maybe this happening for some time. We know sports betting isn't for everyone, that some fans have strong feelings about it. We respect that. The reality is that betting activity already exists around our sports and will continue to do so whether we engage with it or not. This has been a restricted sponsorship category. Riot does not engage with betting companies. Teams have asked us to reconsider our stance, and after years of analysis to make sure we got it right, we agreed it was time to open up this category to create more revenue opportunities for teams. Sports betting, esports betting in this case, according to Sports Radar, on LoL and VCT last year, reached $10.7 billion. And I mean, the funny thing is that however you value the esports themselves, the esport themselves does not have value close to the betting value of the market on esports. So that, I think, gives you an indication as to why, if we want to make esports, let's say, sustainable, whatever you think about the morality, this is a necessity. And even more than that, just an inevitability. Like, we've seen this in mainstream sports. It's not going away. It was always going to come to esports at some point. And as they say, 70% of bets across all sports are placed in unregulated markets with bookmakers who aren't even licensed. We believe it's better to engage in allowing betting sponsorships thoughtfully, carefully, with the right protections, and they're going to have guardrails in place, it seems. So, as they say, we answer the call from our partner teams to open up sponsor opportunities with betting brands to generate additional revenue for their financial health, guides and supports the development of regulations, monitoring best practices, and educational programs that protect the integrity of esports teams, pros, fans, and events, and strengthens and reinforces the competitive integrity standards. Now, they go on to say a few interesting things about how they're going to vet and approve certain partners, how they're going to build on their official partnership with Grid, who's like their data provider, basically. They're going to mandate some team integrity program checks. They talk a bit about Tier 2 as well. While sponsorships are only open to Tier 1 League of Legends, esports, and VCT teams in Americas and EMEA. So that's the starting point, right? So in Americas and Europe, if you're a League of Legends or VCT team in the Pro League, you can do this. Any other region, you can't yet, which is pretty interesting. And obviously, Tier 2, for now, is excluded from this. I imagine, potentially anyway, that could become a thing in due course. I think Tier 2 teams will be happy to hear this, even though they're not included quite yet. There could, I don't know. I'm assuming that they will eventually grow to include that in the conversation, but maybe they're purely focusing on this whole trickle-down effect. So what they say is a portion of Riot's revenues earned from the sports betting program will be invested back into Tier 2 across a number of areas, including increasing prize pools, creating new tournaments to support aspiring pros, additional integrity systems to, or whatever, expanding training and education programs. So, I don't know. What do you guys think about this? Because they don't exactly say that they will open up, like, if Tier 1 teams can have sponsors in this category, you'd think that Tier 2 teams could as well. But instead, Riot is saying, no, we're going to take the money that we make from that and we're going to help the Tier 2 scene, but not exactly help the Tier 2 teams directly. So if I'm an organization in Tier 2, I think I'm happier than I was, but I'm a little bit skeptical still about the way this is going to go. They say a few more things, but it's a pretty interesting time to do this. I think that was the key takeaway for many based on what we are seeing here, because as they mention in the article, 70% of the bets placed on Valorant stuff are placed on, let's say, what do they call them, unregulated sites. And we're seeing a hell of a lot more of that with this whole match-fixing ring, right? We saw Jinggg expose... I mean, look, maybe not everything he said was 100% accurate, and there was lots of talk about that recently, but he is fully confident that what he said to the best of his ability was true, and that Riot Games are investigating still to the present day. But it definitely came at an interesting time, because there was all this talk about money flying around behind the scenes to throw matches, and the implications of that, and the problem that that causes for the scene. And then, obviously a couple of weeks later, Riot are out here saying, yep, we're going to just perfect timing to unveil the fact that we're going to allow the gambling sponsors when our sport is potentially riddled with a major issue caused by gambling. It's like, I'm not saying that they're necessarily doing the wrong thing. I understand why this step is being taken, but equally, many might say, look, they could have tried to deal with that issue first before they come over here and do stuff like this. But, I imagine this is in the pipeline for some time. I wonder what Jinggg has had to say about it, because he's left SR, like he seems to want to go and play with a Counter-Strike, right, and enjoy that scene. And it feels on some level that after all this match-fixing related drama, he's been pushed out of the scene a little bit by his own doing to some extent, because he decided to step away, right, and all this. But comes at an interesting time with Riot now saying, oh yeah, great, gambling sponsors are going to come in thick and fast, and it's going to change the game, right? So yeah, interesting timing to say the very least, but intrigued to your thoughts as ever in the comments section below. Just one final thing, top performing team on every map at Masters Toronto. On Sunset, Sentinels were the best. On Icebox, Run It Back Baby, Fnatic were the best, and on Ascent, PaperX were the best at Lotus and the best at Pearl. We know the Lotus was pretty critical, of course, a map that Fnatic rather like. They were also the best Fnatic on Split, and Gen.G took the win on the Haven thanks to their dominant defensive job most of the times they played it. But yeah, Pearl, PaperX were pretty different gravy. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in a comment. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.